Well, thank y'all for joining us for the last of our 2013 Power Lunch series of the Georgia Chamber. This is our effort to go around the state and talk about some of the issues that are important to the business community, talk a little bit about what we've been focused on for the last session, and a little bit about what we're working on for the near future. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Georgia Chamber, hopefully all of you are, the Georgia Chamber is almost a 100 years old organization with over 23,000 members and investors from every county in the state of Georgia, from every type of business sector. And when our team wakes up every day, it's focused on really three core things. How do we make Georgia more competitive? How do we make our communities more competitive? And how do we make our businesses more competitive in this state? Because when those businesses and communities are successful, they're going to hire jobs and our communities are going to be better, and we're going to have the growth that we need to have the state that we really want here in the state of Georgia. Now, let's start off by sharing a little bit of good news with you. So when we talk about job creation, when we talk about Georgia from that perspective, we're not just talking about today. We have to, as a business community, take the long view. Georgia right now is a state of about 10 million people. But over the next 15 plus years, we're going to add over 3 to 4 million people to the state of Georgia. And depending upon what part of the state you're in, you're going to see different levels of job growth. But as we look at the number of jobs we need today, we also have to look into the future to make sure that we've got the quality jobs that are going to keep our kids here and our grandkids here so that we can continue to improve and grow our communities. Now, we manage as business folks, we manage and watch a lot of different statistics out there. Some of those statistics that we are monitoring right now show some pretty good news for the state of Georgia. What we're seeing so far this year is a 3% increase in our exports. Now, it might not sound like a lot, and we're not talking about imports here. We're just talking about the fact that Georgia is now the number 2 port in the country for exports. And so all the goods, products, natural resources that we have here in Georgia, we're seeing more of those go and be sold on the global market out there. In fact, the Georgia Ports Authority just announced that they had a record April, the busiest month they ever have in the history of the Georgia ports, and we're very close to breaking a new goal as we look and go into the fall here. From our partners over at the Department of Economic Development, we've also seen some good improvement in the number of jobs created, with job announcements up 29% in the state, and investment numbers for this past year over 32% increase from the year before. That equals about $6 billion and about 30,000 new jobs spread all over the state of Georgia. So we're seeing good improvement. We're seeing an opportunity to continue to grow the economy for the next year. In fact, Georgia, according to The Economist, should grow a little bit more than the national average, but still not quite where we want to be, because we're not going to see the decrease in the unemployment rates that we really want to see. But we're moving in the right direction. Now, it's one thing to talk about these numbers and monitor them. It's another to understand why these numbers are going up and why we've had such great success over the last couple of years. And so we asked Dean Summachrist at the University of Georgia, the dean over there of the business school, to take a look at recent announcements and try to tell us what's driving this growth. Now, what he told us was kind of remarkable. He said much of the activity that we're seeing today can be traced directly back to the actions of the Georgia General Assembly and Governor Deal in the 2012 session. Hopefully most of you remember the Georgia Chamber in 2011 partnered with the Department of Economic Development and Governor Deal and led an effort called the Georgia Competitiveness Initiative to look at what we can do to improve Georgia's business climate and job creation. That led to the Competitiveness Agenda, which was about 15 bills in the 2012 session that the General Assembly supported in a bipartisan manner. And when we look back at that, on issues like taking the tax off of energy and manufacturing, we have companies that have come to Georgia and said directly that played a role in their decision to invest here. So when we start talking about what happens at the Georgia Capitol or happens in Washington, and many times we think, well, that really doesn't impact me and my business. The truth is, it impacts economic development, it impacts your bottom line, and that's why we do what we do every day. So the General Assembly session in 2013 ended in April, and it was another very good business session for Georgia businesses. Now, during that session, we tracked about 200 bills. Some of those bills were good for business, some of them were bad, some of them we spent a lot of time working on to make them work for Georgia businesses. And we're not going to share all 200 of you with you, but we want to point out a few that we believe are going to have a direct impact on your bottom line. We worked with a lot of partners to improve the workers' comp legislation and laws in the state of Georgia. While those folks that need that support because they've been injured will continue to get it, we've also put a timeline on there so people can't keep drawing those down indefinitely. Hopefully for Georgia's small businesses in particular, you'll start seeing some benefits and some savings as you sign those workers' comp checks every month. Another area that was important for us over the last 2 years has been improving Georgia's right-to-work laws. Now, Georgia is a very business-friendly state, and we get accolades from our industrial recruiters about how business-friendly we are. But as we see other states improve their right-to-work laws, which we've seen particularly in the last 2 years, we need to continue to keep pace and update our laws. So one of the problems that we had in Georgia, that's been a bill that's been on the books for a long time, simply said that if you're a member of a union and you choose to stop being a member, you still had to continue paying your dues for the rest of the year. Now, that doesn't seem fair or businesslike in any way, and so we've asked the General Assembly, and they supported it, of just saying whenever you end that relationship with the union, you no longer have to pay dues. So again, we think that's fair and business-friendly. We also had several bills that dealt with economic development this year. We continued some tax credits, particularly for the aviation industry. We were able to put in place and keep the angel investor tax credit that helps those small businesses in Georgia that look for additional capital to help grow themselves. It's a tax credit for those folks that want to invest in the next generation of business in Georgia. And so we could go on and on about those economic development bills, but the bottom line is we're still building off the great work we did in 12. Our incentives are effective, and we're going to continue to look at ways to make them better and to keep pace with what's going on in other states. Now, the last area I want to mention to you from this past session, I want to talk about a few bills, but that area is in workforce development. Now, there's no issue that's more important to Georgia businesses than making sure that we have a qualified 21st century workforce. And we're going to come back and talk about that in a few minutes. But this past session gave us several opportunities to improve the workforce condition in Georgia. The first issue that we dealt with was a new bill that ties teacher evaluations to student performance. We want the best teachers in our classroom, and we want them paid the best wages that they can get, but we want to make sure that students are achieving at the right level, and we think this bill helps move us in that direction. We were also able to help our technical colleges and our folks that are trying to go back to school to get the right skills that they need. Over the last few years, we've had significant cuts to our technical college budgets in Georgia, and several thousand Georgians have been unable to go get the skills that they need to get back in the job market. So we're proud this year that the governor and a bipartisan coalition in the House and the Senate brought forth legislation that improved the opportunity to get people back to work and get those skills and put $8 million back into our technical school systems, particularly in the area of the HOPE grants. And so we think that's going to help all over the state of Georgia. We've still got a lot of work we need to do on the right investment in technical education, but this is a good first step. And then the third area really addressed a couple of issues. One is we heard from manufacturers all over the state that they were having a hard time finding certain trade skills and job set skills that they needed to continue to grow their business. Well, we were also hearing from our veterans that there were problems with them getting back to work. In fact, 40% of the veterans in this country right now are unemployed. Quite frankly, folks, that's unacceptable. And as a business community, these are the kind of folks with the kind of job skill sets that we want working for us. Well, what was happening is our military men and women had certain licenses for certain trade skills, but when they came out of the military, they were waiting up to a year or more to get their license through the paperwork with the state of Georgia. And so working with Secretary of State Brian Kemp, Governor Deal, the Office of Workforce Development, and the members of the General Assembly, we were able to put a new bill in place that will expedite the licensing for those military men and women so our manufacturers can hire them, get them back to work, and we can help move the economy forward. So we could go on and on and on about the bills that we worked on this past session, but we're proud of that. But we're also proud that our lobbying efforts have found folks on both sides of the aisles are supporting the business agenda. Georgia's lucky to have a General Assembly and a governor and leadership that care about job creation. Now, a few years ago, you'll probably remember we started a scorecard in Georgia so we can measure how well our legislators do on those issues that are most important to business. That first year, we had 66% of the members of the General Assembly get a passing grade. Last year, for the competitiveness agenda, nearly 79%. And this year, 97% of the members of both parties supported this pro-business agenda in Georgia. So while we're down there lobbying on your behalf, those folks are making the hard decisions. And so you ought to take the time to thank the members of the General Assembly for their hard work this past year. So, why are we at the session? Why do we do this work for you around the clock, year after year? Well, I've been reading a book recently that's really fascinating called The Coming Jobs War by Jim Clifton. And what Jim says in that book, and this is from Gallup, and they've done surveys in over 100 countries, polling, they said for the first time in history, the number one issue in every country in the world is the ability for someone to have a good quality job. Now, that's probably been the priority here in Georgia and in America for a long time. But what's different is it's that way in Africa, in India, in China, in Europe, and all over Asia right now. And so what we have to do, and what he argues is that this changing demographic feeling, this importance of a job now around the world means that the wars of the future won't be fought over borders. They'll be fought over jobs. That's right. And then what he also goes on to say is that jobs war is not going to be won by the federal government and by their policies, but instead will be won by state legislators, city council, county commissions, business communities, local chambers, and development authorities. We have to be prepared in Georgia to win that war, not just against Alabama or Mississippi or North Carolina or Virginia, but against Singapore and Germany and South America. So one of the new things that we're doing at the Georgia Chamber to be better prepared for this coming job war is starting and creating the Georgia Center for Competitiveness here. Now, the focus of this new group at the Chamber is to look at those issues that are important to Georgians in every part of the state, not just today, not just tomorrow, but over the next 40 years so that we're better prepared. And we're dealing with all kinds of issues out there, from tax reform to regulatory reform. But there are three issues that I think are important today that we're working on that I want to mention to you. First of all is everybody's favorite subject, and that's health care. Now, first of all, we are excited that the administration has decided to delay the employer mandate for another year. But folks, that doesn't mean the rest of that bill is not being implemented today, and it doesn't mean that you get a year off before you really have to come to terms with how your company is going to deal with this. The fact is, Georgia businesses, whether or not you support that bill and that law or not, that doesn't matter. That bill is now law, and it will be implemented. And while we'll continue to fight on your behalf in Washington with our different alliances up there, the fact is you need to be prepared for where this is going. So, what do you need to look at? Well, first of all, you need to realize that this is almost $1 trillion tax increase that's going to hit you in a lot of different areas. Now, some of you are saying, well, I'm a small business. I've got fewer than 50 employees, so I'm not required to provide insurance, and therefore this doesn't apply to me. Well, you're not required to provide insurance, that's true. But if you do provide it, you still have to meet certain mandates, you still have to have a certain number of essential benefits, and you're still subject to all the taxes and the other penalties that are out there. That's right. Now, you get to write off the benefits of providing employees their insurance, but you don't get to write off all the other fees or the penalties that you'll have to pay if you don't get it right and you're not in line with what the federal government has regulated. So there are 18 new taxes that you need to be aware of. There are 10 essential benefits that you need to be aware of. And you need to sit down and have this conversation with your accountants, with your HR folks, and you need to start having that conversation today. Most of you have already seen an increase in your taxes when you go to the hospital or the vet because of medical equipment, and you'll start seeing your premium fees added on this year and other fees. Now, we have a flyer that's available for you. It kind of lays out some of the basics of this. And we're going to continue to have series over the next year to try to help you become educated and prepared for what's coming. But there's one area in particular I want to mention to you that's not on the board up here. But that's the impact to the healthcare facilities in your region. We've seen, unfortunately, 3 hospitals close in Georgia over the last year. And there are a dozen or so that are in very dire straits right now. When they look at that shrinking pot of Medicaid dollars, when they look at their DSH payments going away, and they look at declining revenues already, it's easy to see why so many of our rural hospitals are in trouble. And so the Georgia Chamber, along with the Hospital Association, the Rural Hospital Association, and others, are to continue to track this issue, work on it. But I encourage you as a local businessman or woman or a member of your local organization to reach out to those rural hospitals in your area or even to those suburban hospitals in urban areas, because they're all being impacted by this, and see how you can be a better partner and how we can help them survive. Because quite frankly, folks, If we don't have quality health providers in our communities, we won't attract the types of businesses that we need over the long term. So we're engaged in this area. We're going to continue to be engaged, and we're going to continue to provide you solutions as we go through this transition in this incredible industry over the next few years here. Now, when we talk about health care, we can't talk about it for long before we talk about the continued increase in prices. Now, one of the reasons of that is because of civil justice and tort issues that all of us have to deal with out there. That's another area that we're very concerned about. This country's small businesses spend about $233 billion a year on tort claims. That's about $809 per person or per business out there. 35% of all the small businesses in Georgia at some time will have a tort suit filed against them. Now, luckily, only 2% of you are going to end up going to court, but all of you are going to be spending money defending against sometimes fraudulent claims and sometimes very honest claims. So what we want to do is to make sure that Georgia has a business-friendly legal environment and that we're giving you a fair and balanced judiciary to hear these cases in. One of those issues of particular concern for us is seatbelt admissibility in Georgia. Now, it's the Georgia law that we all have to wear our seatbelt, but if we get into a car accident, it's not admissible in a court of law whether or not we had our seatbelt on or not. If they get in a wreck, it could be, with their seatbelt on, it could be a $500 injury. Without it, it could be $5 million. But your company can't submit to the judge whether or not that seatbelt was on or off. It's inadmissible in Georgia. And so we're going to continue to work with our partners out there to find a good path forward on that issue. Another key area for concern for the business community is in e-discovery. What we find now is many small businesses as well as local governments, when lawsuits are filed against them, are spending tens of thousands of dollars just trying to provide e-records for those law cases. And so what we'd like to do is, like many states, is find a good equitable path forward so that that information can be made, but it won't bankrupt the company in the process of putting it together. And so again, we look forward to working with our different partners to find solutions to these and other issues. And if you care about these issues, we ask you to get involved with us, get involved with your local chamber, because it really is going to take the business community talking about the importance of these issues and what they're costing us out there and the fact that they're costing us jobs in order for us to be able to move this issue forward. Now, the third area, and I told you we'd come back to this, it's very important for us, is education in Georgia. The Georgia Chamber is spending more and more of our time on education policy in the state of Georgia, and it's not hard to understand why. We spend $7.5 billion a year from Georgia taxpayers directly on education, and then we add to that another $10 billion a year that we pay to the federal government that comes back down to us. Those are pretty big numbers to spend. So we do have good news in Georgia. We've got a university system that brings in some of the best and brightest from around the world. And we have a technical college system that's the envy of the world. And we do have K through 12 institutions in Georgia that are doing great and innovative things. But when we look at the big picture and we look at the statistics out there, it's not painting the picture that we want the rest of the world to see, nor site selection consultants and CEOs looking to move jobs and companies and investment to our state. Let's take a look at some of these. Georgia ranks 45th in the country for high school graduation. For $17.5 billion, we ought not be satisfied with being 45th in the country. We're 36th in the country for four-year college completion. And we're 41st for 8th grade math scores. Now, you're probably saying, who cares about 8th grade math scores? Well, the fact is the high-tech companies that are looking to move to Georgia are looking for a pipeline of workers for the next 20 years. And whether or not kids are performing well on those 8th grade tests in science and math, tell them what they need to know about whether or not we're going to have the pipeline of workers that they need. And so as a business community, as we look at these numbers and we look at who we're trying to hire, it's easy for us to complain. It's easy for us to say that we're not getting our money's worth. But that's the wrong discussion to have. The discussion that we're trying to lead as the state's business leader is how can the business community become more involved so that we can change these statistics. So let me tell you about a couple of areas where you can get involved that we're working on now. First of all, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to look at how we fund education. Now, a lot of people stand up here and tell you we need to spend more money. I'm not going to do that. With the economy that we continue to have, that's not likely to happen for a while. Instead, what we have to do is to use the money that we have better. So the Georgia Chamber, in partnership with others, worked last year on a study to look at how we fund schools in Georgia. And what we found is the model that we have over 30 years old isn't working anymore. So we have a few recommendations that we're working now with the governor and the members of the General Assembly on. Number one, for those school systems that are performing well, we ought to give them the flexibility that they need to make the best decisions at the local level to educate their kids. And then we need to take those school systems and show the others in the state how they're doing it, how they're winning, and how they're producing great students. Second thing that we're suggesting is that in many school districts, how you look at those dollars, how you understand how dollars are spent are very difficult. I'm on my son's school council at Crabapple Lane Elementary School. And when I sit down with our principal, it's very difficult to follow those budgets. And so you think about a parent out there trying to understand how their school board are making decisions with their dollars or how the State General Assembly are making decisions. It's very difficult. So we're calling for more transparency in how we spend dollars in education in Georgia. The third recommendation that we have is that we need to do something about the growing technical divide between rural Georgia and our more suburban and urban areas of the state. I go out and I'm in schools all the time, and what I see in some schools are a fifth grade where every kid has an iPad, or a school system where every teacher has a smart board, or every kid starting in kindergarten can take home a laptop. And then I go into school systems, most of the time in very rural areas, where there's maybe only one computer in a classroom. Guys, we're producing one set of students ready to use the tools to be successful in college and in career, but we're producing a whole other group of students who don't have access to those tools, who won't be successful in the long run. And so we're going to encourage the General Assembly and others to look at how we help those districts get the right technology so our students have the best available tools. There are several areas, though, where you as a local businessman and woman can get involved and make a difference in your local school system. We've been working with Superintendent John Barge for the last year and a half to improve the career paths that our students can choose when they go into 9th and 10th grade. We've had over 2,000 HR directors and business leaders from all over Georgia say, here are the skill sets we need in these particular areas. And now starting this school year, schools all over Georgia, high schools, can adopt these new career paths. But guys, we've helped write the curriculum. But you know as well as I do, if we just hand that curriculum to a teacher, she's not going to be as effective as she could be if we're actually in the classroom with her. And so what we're doing is encouraging local chambers and Rotary clubs, encouraging our members to talk to the school board, to talk to the principal and say, here are the jobs and the skill sets we're going to need for the next 5 to 10 years. And then go into the classroom and those career paths and help the teacher teach those students those skills that they're going to need when they come apply for a job at your office. We can't keep complaining if we're not willing to roll up our sleeves and go into the classrooms ourselves and be a true and real partner to our teachers out there. So if you want to learn more about these career paths, we encourage you to visit our website at gachamber.com or talk to your local school board or your local principal pretty quickly here, because we want this to move forward and to be able to get these out into our school systems this year. Now, we could go on and on and on talking about all kind of different issues that the Georgia Chamber is working on. But here's the bottom line. We're out there working for you, for our members in every county and every business sector out there. We're lobbying on your behalf. We're providing programs for your behalf. We're trying to strengthen your local communities and your local chambers. And we want to be a partner everywhere we go. But we also want to be about leadership. You won't see this organization complain or throw stones from the back of the room. We're going to be engaged, and we're going to be sitting down at the table. And most of the time, we're going to be leading the discussion out there. So I hope that all of you here will continue to be involved in the Georgia Chamber, to be involved in your local chambers, and to be a good partner with these institutions that we talked about today. Please call on the Georgia Chamber if we can ever help you. We appreciate your support and all that you do.